Today's episode is going to be a simple dive into a particular tool, nothing too theoretical, I imagine, although there's no telling with us. And I particularly like this one because Jim pushed back pretty hard on even including it, which I love, because the last thing we want to do is load people down with a bunch of theoretically cool, oh, hey, I had an idea, let's throw it in the toolkit. And next thing you know, people are walking off to, into battle carrying a backpack that's 300 pounds loaded down with stuff they don't really need. And that's much too easy to do. Anyway, that's my intro, Jim. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's, anything that goes into the Transformative Leadership Lab tool bag has got to be something where the ROI is at least, 10x the time that you put into it. So
yeah,
if it doesn't meet that metric, then it's not worthy of us, even talking about it, because busy managers don't have time to do, paper pushing activities.
Yeah, stuff that sounds cool in the abstract. And by the way, this is one of the things that I lean on Jim heavily for, is he's got so much experience, managing managers and managing directors and running large organizations of hundreds of people that I don't have. So if it doesn't pass the Jim sniff test,
I'm like the helicopter parent of leadership time, because I know that if it's not worthy of, if it doesn't have a big immediate payoff, then busy executives just don't have time to do it. I mean, I know I didn't when I was a CEO. Like, I wouldn't do something unless the time that I put into it was exponentially paid off by how it improved my ability to lead and create clarity and balance in my life.
Right. And that's one of the reasons, for example, we are such fans of the one-on-one, that it is, proven itself both in research literature and in hard-won experience. I've been talking about this for well over a decade with my clients. Jim's done it and talked about it and coaches it with his coaching clients. And we teach our
specifically students, the manager tools one-on-one,
having done manager tools style.
Having done one-on-ones in many different formats through the years, the manager tools 03 one-on-one is the most effective one-on-one style.
Yeah, and just to recap, the key elements of the kind of one-on-one we're talking about in the player lineup, today's topic is the player lineup. It builds on the one-on-one. And so we want to make sure that we're on the same page here. So manager tools style one-on-one, it's every single week with every one of your direct reports. You could go every other week, but you lose a lot of effectiveness. So let's assume it's every week. It's each person who reports to you. It's 30 minutes long. It's scheduled in advance. You sit there and take notes, pencil and paper, and the other person goes first. This is sacred time for your subordinate to know that they have your full attention, that they are important to you. And the way you signal that something's important to you is you give it your attention, and your attention is a very scarce commodity. And there's a meta message here of like, hey, you get a half an hour from me every single week because you are so important. And that over time has a cumulative positive effect. By paying close attention and letting them speak first, you get to know them in great detail, which is exactly what you need if you're going to make best use of them as a teammate and help them reach their potential, help them grow. And
yeah, not only is it usually become the team members favorite thing that they do all week.
They love it.
They love it. But the what's in it for me for the manager supervisor is a huge payoff. Normally email goes way down because now there's a repository for each person on the team to have direct conversation in that first 10 minutes of the O3 to bring up their challenges and things. So it solves that whole back and forth email chain that happens, because they know that they can save it until their regularly scheduled time, and then they can bring it up with their manager then. So just email savings alone, and back to the beginning of the podcast, that's the metric that any tool that we introduce through Transformative Leadership Lab has to meet. There's got to be an obvious immediate payoff to doing the tool.
Right.
So
just to recap, we claim with, I think, great backing, and if you try it and do it the way we're describing, you will find this is true for you, that regular one-on-ones, the way we're describing it, the way it's documented in Mark Horstman's book, The Effective Manager, will bring back every half hour you invest will bring you back many hours of savings throughout the week of less interruption, fewer back and forth, better relationship, higher trust, better understanding of your team and where they're coming from, on and on and on.
More forward progress, fewer roadblocks, et cetera, et cetera.
Now we get into the player lineup, which is intended to be the focus for our conversation today. And I like this tool. I think I either invented it or whoever I stole it from, I don't remember who it was. I guess, I don't know. There are very few new ideas. But I created mine because I have a bad memory, a bad verbal memory for details. And I don't trust my memory when it comes to things like people's spouses' names and their kids' names and the details that are very important to them, that if I didn't have a place to write it down, I forget they told me. And I've seen this a lot with some of the people I've taught this technique to. You got a player lineup. It's a spreadsheet with a row for each person and some columns for key things like kid's name, spouse's name, where do they want to be in a couple of years? What's their personal growing edge right now that they're trying to get better at? Do they have any particular techniques they're engaging in to try to get better, and so on? And I got to tell you a story. I was teaching this to a manager out of Trinidad back when I had a client down there. And I just taught him the player lineup, and he was stuck in the car doing some like road trip thing with one of his subordinates. And he remembered that he had this blank player lineup back home. And he starts saying, so tell me where you want to be in a couple of, he started asking the questions from the columns and just like, noting the answer as he's listening. And he said he wouldn't have even asked the questions and he wouldn't have thought to remember them if he hadn't had this empty space to put them into. And once you create the lineup and you see these blanks in there, you're like, yeah, what is this person's 5-year goal? Or what are they trying to get good at? Or is there some skill that they really wish that they could develop? A classic thing is, we need to have one of our team members be our local expert, quote unquote, for the SharePoint or some other technology. We needed a local person to be our like designated technologist. And if you had to pick, who would you pick, Jim? The most technical person? Probably,
right?
Right. But on your one-on-ones, you discovered that they kind of hate how they keep being pigeonholed into technology and they really want more customer contact. And another person in another one-on-one said they're really hoping to grow their technical skills. Now, who do you pick?
Yeah, it's a growth.
The person who wants it and won't resent it. And you might even take that first person and say, hey, would you mentor the newbie on the technology, which is a human contact thing. And you get to be the support coach as this newer person takes on this technical mantle. And there's a depth of knowledge and a level of detail that you get to know about people. And I love having a place to put the information when I don't yet know the information, because the empty spot on the grid calls out to me. And I'm like, I don't yet know this thing about them. And I will listen for it, or I might even bring up something about it in order to hopefully solicit what it is. I can't tell you how many times people have mentioned their wife's name or their kid's name, and I'm not tuned in, and it goes right by me. And at the end of the meeting, I'm like, oh, they mentioned their family's names. I forgot to. And inevitably, it's someone for whom I do not have a player lineup. Because if they did, I would have scribbled it on a corner of a piece of paper on my desk and would have put it over in that lineup for later.
So I was super, super skeptical when Thomas first introduced the
correctly so,
because I do have a good memory. And, again, if we're going to introduce,
so for you, maybe it's a waste.
If we're going to introduce a tool, it's got to be valuable for everybody, not just a subset of our, of our audience. And so I was really looking.
So here's Thomas over here collecting all this information, like a little information magpie, collecting stuff.
And honestly, it felt kind of creepy at first.
Well, yes, I'm keeping a dossier on everyone's personal information. Yeah.
But once I connected it through the O3 process, and specifically under the manager tools model, the last 10 minutes of the O3 is for future growth and development discussions. And under their guidance, that discussion doesn't need to happen every single week, oftentimes the entirety of the O3 is spent on, their part of the conversation and then your part of the conversation. But best practice is to have that development conversation at least every 4 to 6 weeks. And I would say every 4 weeks is about the perfect cadence. And the challenge of having that conversation is, if you're documenting, using, a one-on-one form of some kind, now you've got to flip back through all the multiple weeks and look at the last development conversation. And it's not
Which
really
means you're not
helpful.
going to do it.
Yeah, you're probably not going to do it. And it's not, sort of top of mind. And also development and growth really, should be looked at the entire team level. And so,
Ooh.
so two things, so there's a confluence of kind of two things. One, having an easy repository for that growth and development information that you
Yeah,
can
one place
reference
to
easily,
look.
but also look at it in the context of the whole team so that you can draw those, synergies, between different players on the team and growth and development opportunities, and like connecting the dots, like you said earlier, Thomas, like, hey, you've got a tech person who really doesn't want to do tech anymore, wants to grow in some other areas, but could be a perfect mentor for a person who wants to grow some tech abilities. What a great way as a leader to initiate, a new style of relationship on the team and, provide growth for both people.
Yeah.
So utterly fantastic. Very difficult to see that unless you've got, some place where that information can be seen all at one time.
Yeah. And so what you want to visualize when you think about the player lineup is, and I use a spreadsheet, or sometimes I'll use a Word document that's laid out in landscape format, and I put up one of those tables in. But there's a row for each person, and there's a column for each thing you care about. And it's a way of just keeping it organized. And you can ask yourself, well, what are the things I would need to know in all in one place when, I as a business owner, or I as a senior person, or my boss comes to me who's more senior and says, hey, let's talk about long-term picture here. Let's talk about the growth of your team. Right. Well, anytime that comes up, and it should come up, I would hope at least once a quarter, you'd be thinking about, yeah, how do I grow this group? What do we need to get better at? What are we being called on to do that we're not yet good enough at? Or what do I suspect we're going to start being called on? Like, if you guys, here it is, we're recording this in September 2025. And if no one on the team is at least experimenting with AI, I would be scared that no one is dabbling in it, because it's just going to keep getting more and more important over the next several years. And you kind of want somebody in the team who's at least trying stuff out and is doing that mess around in the garage level of getting familiar. Mm-hmm. So I'd be looking for that. If your team was, for a fact that they're going to start adopting a new ERP next year, I'd start looking at, well, is there something we should get good at now? Or, I know that my firm has, too many of my top people are doing the work that ought to be delegated, but for some reason they're not able to delegate it. What's the skill deficit? Like, why are they unwilling or unable to delegate these tasks further down to less expensive people? Frankly, there's an economic case here that you want work done at the least expensive level that it can be done with quality. And part of how you change that over time is you grow people's skills so that they're able to do more senior work from a more junior level. And that's called career growth, right? But which skills? Like, where are we constrained? What are we struggling with? Is it, are we got, I work with some attorneys, and often the attorneys are doing things that the paralegal ought to be able to do, but they're not doing because the attorney doesn't want to take the time to teach them. And the paralegals are too busy doing to learn, and everyone's too busy to get better. It's like, oh, come on. You're too busy to get better, really? Mm-hmm. But that could be the vibe, right? Okay, so you as the boss get to break that and shift that and insist, hey, we're going to take a half a day every other week, and we're all going to learn, or everyone's going to take an hour on Fridays to learn a thing, or, every other huddle, we're going to rotate it, and someone's going to teach the rest of us something you learned recently. And your name's on the calendar, and you better learn something because you're going to be up there teaching, and no one wants to look like a clown in front of their peers. And it's a way of, standardizing this idea that we all learn all the time. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. Okay. but where should you be pushing? And then this is where your strategic understanding of what the future is going to look like should be matching up with your overview of where people are today. Where is that overview? Player lineup, maybe.
Mhm.
And my other, okay, I'm ranting. I want to roll here. I'll give you one more thought, and Jim can shoot me down because he knows this stuff better than I do. And that is, I'm at the director level. I've got a bunch of managers, and I want to have regular growth conversations with them about their growth. So I've got my player lineup with their name in it. And also, how are they growing their teams? And, I want to be able to say, hey, walk me through all your people and where they're at and where they're going and how you're trying to grow them. And what I can do as your boss to support you to grow them. Plausible?
Yeah, I think that's a nice side benefit,
but not the main
I'd say
one.
that's a secondary benefit to it. But
Okay.
that alone wouldn't be enough. That alone wouldn't be enough for me to do it as a busy
Yep.
leader. And also, if say I'm a CEO of a company, I don't have anybody that I'm going to report that to. So why would I do it?
Yeah, it would be
But
to guide your conversations for yourself. It wouldn't be because you had to
right,
like show your work to somebody.
right. And I think that's, again, it has to have intrinsic value, I think,
Yeah.
for someone to even look at it, or for me to recommend it to someone. It's got to have intrinsic value that is going to, leverage time.
If you were managing managers today in a larger organization, as you have for so many years, would you ever require or expect someone to do a player lineup, or would you just do it by example, or what would be your relationship with that?
It depends. I might include it in a bigger management process. It might, but I'm not
Talk
sure.
about that process.
It would really depend, because I'm not a big fan of, sort of these like one size fits all, must do everything. That's not my style of leader. However, I might recommend it for someone who's a bit lower on the relating side of things as a very effective tool for helping someone who tends to be higher on the requiring side,
Right.
to build their relating skills. Now, someone who's already an excellent relator, I'm not probably going to, have them focus on building out a tool like that. If they're really effective on the relating side, perhaps, I'm hearing an argument in my head of, there's perhaps an application for building better requiring through the use of that tool. Maybe, but again, I'm not a one size fits all leader. And I tend to shy away
Right.
from too much bureaucratic standardization of those types of processes, because
Yeah. The odds of that paying for itself get diminished pretty quickly.
Well, and it goes into that realm of there's something there. It goes into a realm of like management by leadership by checklist, and
Oh,
that's
right.
icky and ineffective.
Well, see, this is where we notice that Jim is much more of a natural relator than I am, and I'm, let's just say, not. I mean, I've learned to be over time, and Jim's got a great memory for these kinds of things, and I really don't. So I would probably adopt it where he might not, because he could keep it in his
I
head
do
very effectively.
love, especially putting in, whatever assessments your organization is using, whether it's Principles U or, the positive intelligence saboteurs, or, even DISC, or, things like that. Having that information readily available, and being able to see it across the team, also a really nice, sort of secondary value to the player
Right.
lineup.
I'm going to pop on screen real quick just for fun. An image of, now I'm not, apparently well, we can stick it in post-production, or we'll give you a link to it, an example of a player lineup. And in the case, the one that I was showing Jim the other day when we were preparing for today's cast, right? Person's name, maybe a photo of their face, especially when you're first getting to know a team and you're trying to like really rapidly ramp up your understanding of a team. This could be a great tool for that. And particularly if you're going to like ever show this to your boss and like walk your boss through your team, like having your boss know what people's faces look like, because he or she may not really know your team very well. So name in the face. What are their top values? Like what really motivates them from a values perspective? You know, their spouse and kids' names. My next column is about their Ocean personality style. Ocean is the Big Five personality index. It's a very common one. Or Principles U or Top Saboteurs. And then strengths and weaknesses. I've got a spot for that. And then long-term career goal. And my next two are, what's their next desired position? Where do they want to go from here? And what experiences do they need in order to make that change? Mm-hmm. Because the experience they need to prove that they can do this new job that they're hoping to move into, that's part of our growth plan for them, I would think. At least in some cases it will be.
Mm-hmm. And to me, that's where the real value of the tool comes from.
Right, because once you start, if you've got a place to go that you're always going to go, I know the correct answer to
those last three columns of like, what's their next desired role? What skills do they need to acquire to get there? And then what activities, I'd probably add a column of like, what activities are they currently, engaging in to build that? And then that's what I would focus on in the development phase, part of the O3 is, having a regular check-in and a tool to help me do that effectively. Like,
nice. That's
money right there. That's every minute I spend putting into that, and updating that, at the end of that call or that one-on-one is going to pay off in spades.
Nice. I have one other thought, and that is if someone's listening to this and they like the idea of developing people, they're resisting having a spreadsheet called the player lineup with this kind of information on it. You might maybe get a similar effect as follows. Hopefully you're doing paper notes for your one-on-ones as suggested by Mark Horstman. And that's what I've always done. And I think it's very effective. When you write on paper with a pen, people feel like you're listening to them. If you're typing on a keyboard, it's like you're doing email and you're ignoring them. Just don't type on a keyboard when you're trying to talk to somebody one-on-one. It doesn't go well. So you're writing your paper notes, you stick them in a folder with their name on it. Inside the left-hand flap of that folder, you could scribble in there about their future because that stuff doesn't change much over time. So that could be a stopgap. If you don't really feel like doing a full-on player lineup, please at least track their long-term goals and what they need next in order to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love, I personally tend to approach leadership from a coach perspective.
Yes.
And, so the player lineup is a perfect analogy for, your role as a coach in a leadership role, especially with regards to people's growth. So, again, having that one-stop shop to look at the whole team and think about the team both holistically, individually, and think about players and positions and, be able to strategize. Like it's the best tool that I've heard of for doing that type of work. And not that I would use it primarily in this role, but looking at it also to sort of, so many times in my career, I was guilty of kind of kicking the can down the road with a lower, maybe not a low performer, because there's, performance and, there's plenty of other tools that sort of capture the low, the poor performer, but sort of that lower performer. And by the way, I'm not advocating stack ranking or anything like that, but just looking at the team holistically and going, there's this person who just is kind of bobbing along, and they're not a low performer, but they're not at the same rate. Being able to see that in one place and then be able to, ask yourself, like, how could I help this person, get energized, engaged? I think it could be a great tool for that as well.
Super. So there you have it. There's the player lineup, arguably a recent addition to our pantheon of tools, and something that I think you've now seen, if you're one of our listeners and maybe one of our current or former students, that we are very careful of what we try to stick you with in terms of practices to try. We have a pretty high bar for how useful something needs to be before we're going to suggest you use it, and before we'll use it ourselves. Closing thoughts, Jim?
Yeah, just I don't know, which principle is that of ours? No BS. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, high utility, low drag, and compounding return on your time and energy investment.
Mhm.
And
And a place for it to go, like a place that it fits in the leadership cadence, right?
oh, we haven't talked about leadership cadence very much.
Yeah.
Do we want to
Well,
talk? We want to touch on that?
just if if this tool existed and it didn't have a place where it resided, and it's just kind of untethered floating out there, like
Right. It's not connected to
anything.
O3. It's not connected to one-on-ones. It's not connected to some sort of quarterly check back in.
Yeah, when you're busy doing all the things that you're trying to do as a leader, and have a family and do all those things, like those untethered things, they just don't. It's impossible to get them done. So
Yep.
it's got to have a cadence where it fits into a routine
Yep.
of some kind, and it's that way it becomes a habit.
Right. I want to relate an instant when I think I did this right. I'll be curious how Jim hears it, because I know how I intend it. So I was managing a guy named Brandon, and one of his goals was to get this certification, and it didn't really serve the organization for him to get it, but it clearly was important to him. And so every couple of weeks, I would make sure to touch on it and say, so last few weeks ago, you mentioned you still wanted that certification, and you said you were going to do something about that, like maybe find a study class to take or something. How's that going? And his face would always light up, and he would like, oh yeah, you remember that I'm doing that thing. And sometimes you're like, well, I haven't really done anything. And I'm not judgmental, right? I'm not like, well, what's wrong with you? It was just, oh, okay. Well, maybe it's right for you not to do anything. Is it still a goal? He goes, yeah, it really is. Oh, next inquiry, of course, is, well, so what do you think's getting in the way? I just haven't made the time. It's like, well, again, coaching question would be, well, is it okay that you're not making the time? No, it's really not. It's bothering me. Okay. So what do you want to do? Again, I'm not pushing him in any direction, but I'm helping him see himself by drawing his attention to his own goals and his performance or non-performance. And after a couple of weeks of this, over several months, he'd be like, yeah, I'm going to find a class. And he did, and then he signed up for the class, and then he started taking the class. And so you can be a very positive influence on somebody in their life and career by helping them grow in the ways that are important to them, often in a way that also helps the company, but not necessarily always.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to draw the ROI lines back to performance and engagement from that, because and the glory of it is that it was done with benevolence, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it was done because you genuinely cared about the guy,
Yeah.
and you wanted him to be successful, in work, inside work, and outside of work. And
Yeah.
so you built trust, that works perfectly through the trust model.
Right.
You built, and you offered him opportunities and insight, and some benevolent coaching, and I guarantee that was reciprocated in some form, with his engagement and
He
trust.
knew I was on his side. He knew I had his best interest at heart. And of course, whatever thing snags him in his personal stuff, it's probably the same thing that's going to snag him in his work stuff. Right. So I'm just getting to know him as a person better and better. And it just helps me understand how to help him be a top performer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
Let's wrap up. How would you recap all this? I feel like we want to wrap up and say something sort of conclusion-y here near the end.
You can edit
we're so
this, right?
we're so technical here. We're so smooth.
What have we said that we haven't already said?
Yeah, I just want to kind of wrap it up. It's like, so if I were to summarize what we're suggesting, it's, always do the O3s. That I think it's one of the few really mandatory things that both you and I believe in so fervently.
Yeah.
That a manager style O3 is.
I'd say give the player lineup a try for 3 months, and give it 3 rounds of development.
Yeah, and if it sings for you, great. And if it feels like a stupid, boring drag that you just can't find the time for, then there's your answer.
Yeah.
So consider this one of our optionals, like one-on-ones, O3s, managers, tool style one. That's not optional. I will die on that hill.
Yeah, same.
And the player lineup, useful adjunct potentially, And I would say, especially if you're taking over a new team, especially if, like me, you don't have the best memory for these things and you'd like support.
Absolutely fantastic tool for a new team. Fantastic tool for a new team. Like,
yeah. And if I were mentoring a newer manager, especially if they, because any team that you take over is new for them, I might say, hey, I want you to do this player lineup thing for a couple of months and show it to me periodically so I can kind of see how you're getting on. Because I like to have inspectable artifacts so I can see, like, are you doing the stuff? I would totally assign O3s, and I would say, show me some of your raw notes from your O3s. Show me how you're doing them. And they get this guilty look like, oh, I don't have them here. You didn't take notes, did you? Yeah, well, maybe not. Okay. But in the future, you do understand, right? And I would give them religion on the importance of that element. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, agreed.
Super. So that's our show for today. In the notes, we'll be giving you show notes for this episode and a link to a downloadable template and example of a player lineup for you to look at. It'll be a PDF because you're going to want to rebuild it yourself with your own column names. I don't want to give you a spreadsheet because you might be too inclined to just follow my guidance or our headings, and this has to work for you. And on that note, thank you all for being part of the audience. Thank you for listening and for caring about being a better and better manager. That's what we love and it's who we care about. All right. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers.